Thank you, everybody. As Andrew said, my name is Mark Gaynord. We're talking a little bit about my thesis today, Popping the Bubble, the impact of sports programming on the cable television bubble. Now, the first thing I want you to think about is your current cable plan. Think about if you've had it for 10 or 15 years, it's probably gone up in price a few times, even though you haven't added to the hundreds of channels you don't watch. Are you really satisfied with such a service? Is it worth it? Well, you might think that you don't have another option, but the first thing we have to do is look at how the cable industry is set up today. Now, your channels are grouped into packages. You have a basic package that has pretty much nothing that you wouldn't want to watch, and it tiers up from there. You can't pick the channels you want. You're forced into the bundles the cable company provides for you. Often the bundles carry unrelated channels, so you get a bunch of channels you don't need to get the few that you do. Like I said, especially true in sports, your big sports programming, especially your regional sports network or RSN, which locally is Root Sports, is typically 2 or 3 tiers up from the basic package. So if you are a sports fan, you typically pay more for your cable plan than otherwise. And the way it works is the channels charge broadcast fees for their channels. The cable industry takes that fee, adds their markup to it, and adds it all into your bill. So if you have X number of channels, the fee of that plus the cable markup is what you pay for your cable. So if you have more channels, you obviously pay more money. Now, one of the articles I read discussed how the debundling of the cable industry could come from the debundling of 2 other industries that we're going to look at. First was the newspaper industry. It used to be, if you wanted to read a newspaper, it might be crazy to some of you, you had to go and buy a paper. That was the only way to read the news. Now, you hop on your computer, you can read just the news you want. You don't have to buy the whole paper, and you can read just what you need to read. The same can be said about the music industry. Before, when a new song came out, you were really into it. If you wanted to own it for your collection, you had to go and buy the whole album. Understand that you can still buy the whole album, but today, if you want just one song, you can buy it. Typically, you'll like 1 or 2 songs, and you'll have an album that you don't want to listen to the rest of them. Well, today you don't have to do it. And the 2 takeaways from this, or the biggest takeaway from this, is that both of these were fueled by technology. Before, now the internet exists, now that you can do these things, they weren't possible before. And cable is a lot of the same way. There are a lot of ways now to get cable alternatively than there used to be in the past. And that's one of the first things, that's what we're going to look at now, is that some alternatives to cable. For just regular shows, there are services such as Hulu, Amazon Prime, and Netflix. Now, Netflix offers more old shows, whereas Hulu has current shows that are on and all their past seasons, so you can catch up and not miss anything. You can pay for these subscriptions if you're just into watching shows. Another way to do it is, say you miss a show that's on the night before, you have something to do. You can watch the next day typically through the network's website. I know like CBS, NBC, etc. You can watch their shows the next day. And there's also, it used to be the big rabbit ears, now it's all digital with the converter box, where you can watch your television channels, the free local channels, through that way. Now for sports, it's a little harder because, I mean, the NFL is on local channels, but you're still just looking at whatever ones they decide to show to you. If you want to be able to watch what you want, there are some different, each league has their own like service at this point where you can subscribe and watch just those leagues. But they're strict, they're pretty much stuck on pretty rigid blackout rules. I know the Pirates, like locally, their blackout expands the whole way into Ohio. And so even if you're not like in that team's market, you can't really watch them. So there are devices that may or may not be illegal, the jury's kind of out, that scramble your location. So when your IP address sends out to the server, it thinks that you're in Des Moines, Iowa, so you can watch the Pirates even though you may be in Boone Township, Pennsylvania. So, and all of these alternatives have resulted in what we're going to get into a little bit is they say that millennials are the most likely to cut the cord. And it's kind of not the descriptive term because you're not really cutting the cord, whereas you're never getting it in the first place. It's our generation, when we graduate, move out on our own, we understand the alternatives, and or we don't have any money, so we don't subscribe to cable in the first place. Now, some possible changes that could come from this. There are currently 15 million American households that have an internet connection but don't have cable. Now, while I'm sure some of them may just not watch any sort of television at all, most likely the majority of them subscribe to some sort of alternate streaming service. And then one of the big things for cable, as we talked about a little bit ago, is that consumers really want what they refer to as a la carte pricing. You get to pick just the channels you want and pay just for that, like you can do with pretty much everything else nowadays. Another solution to that they talked about in the literature was that the cable companies could offer you, still have to buy 20 channels, but you get to pick the 20 channels you want. So they still get you to subscribe to an X number of channels, and you get at least, hopefully, most channels that you would actually want. Now, the cable companies are aware of this, and they're looking to counteract it somewhat right now because they're not too worried about it. For example, Verizon Fios has started offering a sports add-on package to their cable plans, but it's not that great. It has ESPN 46 or whatever, and so it doesn't include your RSN and the major channels you would actually want. So it's a sports alternative, but it doesn't get you what you need really. And then another network who's tried to do something is Dish actually offers you can stream cable through the internet, or their version of television through the internet. It does include ESPN, which is a big one, but one of the drawbacks of it is, again, you don't pick what you want. It's basically the one package, so if it's not what you need, it's not really going to be practical for you at this time. Now, so for my survey, we were looking to try to get to a point where people are going to be fed up with cable, don't want it anymore, and they have to do something else. Well, what we wanted to do originally was pull a bunch of data, look at all the numbers, but unfortunately none of it is readily available. So we tried to find people's opinions and see what they would do with their cable subscription. So we did 2 separate surveys. One was we were able to get some of our questions into the R&B Polling Institute, which surveys nationally. And we used, while it does hit all age groups, I used that more for the older demographic, and then I administered a survey myself that hit the younger demographic. We wanted to get the results of those, compare it, and then look and see if these results back up what we wanted. So the first survey, like I said, it was in the Polling Institute last winter. We asked similar questions to what we asked in the student survey, but again, we were targeting the older demographic. The one drawback of this is we weren't able to get the questions in the survey exactly as we wanted. We submitted them, they changed them, they told us to change them, they didn't. You know how it goes. So some results of this, we can't get into much of it, but 8% of the older demographic stated that they watch their television primarily via a streaming service. That means that shows that the majority of the older generation is still resistant to this and has their basic cable. Only 40% of them said they anticipate canceling their cable television. Now honestly, that question is kind of in a vacuum because if technology in 10 years makes it even easier, that they understand, could change their opinion, but at this point in time, they would not do it. But 69% of them did say that they would be confident in their ability to stream television via the internet. So they're not necessarily going to, but at least most of them feel like they could. Now, like I said, the second survey distributed it out. We got 250 results back, mostly from RV students. There were 10 or 11 adults responded to it. I kind of just excluded those results because we wanted to focus more on the younger demographic. So, and this was again designed to see if different answers would come from the younger generation, because as I said, the research suggests that it'll most likely be our generation that will be cutting the cord in the future. Now, some results of this, 81% of this demographic responded that they don't watch every channel in their package, which is not surprising, seeing you have so many channels you don't necessarily need. 59% of them state that they watch the show after they air online, so you wait till the next day and watch it, or the next week, you TiVo it, whatever you need to do. 81% of them said they would cut cable given limited resources, which, I mean, just makes sense. And this was the biggest response in the survey was 98% said they would like to build their own cable package. I don't know what the other 2% were thinking, but. Now, if we look at the results put together, it seems that, like I said, the older generation is most likely to not get into the alternatives for a number of reasons. They don't know what they are, they just don't like change, or they don't know how to do it. And the younger generation growing up more in the technology age is more receptive to some of the alternatives and the departure from the basic cable model. And then for either group, cost would be one of the most significant factors. In both surveys, people said, even if they thought they would switch or not, they would most likely switch due to cost. And then, so, like I said, to wrap this up here, there was a limited scope of what we were able to do. What we wanted to do and what we were able to do were not the same thing, just based on the readily availability of the information. For further research, you could test some of these claims backed up in the survey and see if the numbers support them. And then the 2 conclusions from the research that I pulled out was that the younger generation is the most likely to, when we move out, not subscribe to cable and get our television through an alternative means. And I feel that the current cable model is unsustainable, and cable companies are either going to have to change or be forced into change.